Most of my teachers have fucked me. Welcome to Reddit Town Hall. Subscribe for daily videos. Students who've had sex with their teachers, at what point did your relationship turn physical? How do you feel about it now? After I graduated HS, I saw my history teacher at a bar and he bought me a drink, took me back to his place and we fucked. I snuck out the next morning and I haven't heard from him since. After graduation, I hooked up with my old history teacher a few times. I frequently would watch his daughter when he had to work late. I was invited to go camping with the two of them. Let's have a drink to celebrate the beginning of summer. Changed quickly. I ended it very abruptly when his daughter started calling me mom. When I was 17, I got the chance to go to school in the States, born in Greenland, and so I had a senior year here. The English teacher had just gotten the job there according to the other kids my age. But what happened was I needed help just speaking and learning English better, so she said she'd help me out. I'd come in after school and we'd do the flashcard BS, and eventually she started asking me what I thought about American girls and if I prefer blondes, brunettes and etc. questions. Slowly got more personal until she gave me her phone number, told me to call her at 8 and she'll have plans. I was confused as hell, but when I got to her house my other head took over the thinking. P.S. If I messed up any grammar, please excuse it. I didn't pay a lot of attention during the lessons. Edit a word. I had sex with a high school guidance counselor, but I don't know if that's what you're looking for. A couple I know met as teacher, M, and student, F, at graduate school. According to her, she didn't ask him out until after the grades were in. According to him, she needed an A, but it's my dad, so he's probably kidding. I had sex with my high school gym teacher after I graduated. I was really overweight and just not pleasant to look at in high school, but I had a huge crush on him. After graduation I lost weight and looked him up on Facebook. I said we should meet up for dinner, so we did. I told him I used to have a gigantic crush on him, which he didn't believe. He said I should go to his place for dinner sometime, and of course I was all for it. I get there and he made a pizza and we had some beer. Then, watched TV on the couch for what seemed like an eternity, just talking and joking. That led to cuddling and wabam, my hand was on his dick. He led me to the bedroom and we proceeded to have some of the best sex I've ever had in my life. Since then he's texted me randomly wanting more. We've exchanged pictures and videos and sometimes called each other for the big O, but never got together again. Conquest complete. Not a teacher but a teacher's assistant. I was a junior in college and she was in her first year of grad school, doubling as a TA. So basically larger classes were always split into smaller sections that had to meet once a week outside of the normal class period. Anyways, I was always pulling solid grades, sat in the front, and would respond to her questions. I later found out that she hated public speaking and was always nervous when she stood in front of our sections, so she really appreciated my participation, plus I was always making jokes and she liked the funny ones. I go to her office hours one day, she helps me out with the paper I was doing and we go eat afterwards. We talked mostly about school and career goals, but also some stuff about the difficulties of dating. And then we go get drinks. And then she was getting way flirty and touching my arms and legs. I end up walking her to her apartment building. She tells me to come up and have a nightcap with her. Halfway through she asks if I'm ever gonna make a move. I put down my drink, leaned over and kissed her. We wound up having sex shortly after and we kept it up for the rest of the school year. And yes, I got an A in the class. She got the DTLDR, slept with my TA for being an active participant in class. I'm a male faculty member at a community college. About 7 years ago I had this student in my introduction class. She was inquisitive, motivated, and very attractive. I usually give my students nicknames, secretly, as a device to help me remember them. And I remember writing on my attendance sheet Jasmine, because she looked just like the Disney princess. I was always very professional and careful to treat her like any other student so she didn't feel uncomfortable, as I was sure she might feel that way around the other drooling males. Well, she easily earned an A in the course and we left for summer break. Fall semester starts up and she is in my advanced level class. She sits in the front row, and again was one of the top students in the class. She was also one of the slowest students to pack up her belongings after each session, so we usually walked out together casually talking about the exciting parts of the lesson. About week 13 out of 15, she approaches me and tells me that she has a question she needs to ask, and if she can meet with me for 5 minutes or so. I was careful to meet only in public on campus because of the great stigma between attractive students and their professors. We met on a bench and she professed that she liked me and wanted to go on a date. I refused politely and stammered something about school policy, despite every molecule on my body chastising me for rejecting. After the class we became friends on Facebook, and she had recently taken some modeling photos and posted them on her profile. Welp. That was too much for me and I sank into despair, wondering if I made a mistake in choosing my career over the perfect partner. Then, over the break she emailed thanking me for the class. I immediately emailed back, doling out praise to her. She then immediately emailed me back saying that she left the college and enrolled in the university. We met up and had our first date not long after. We're currently married and have been together for almost 7 years. She is the best thing to happen to me and I would have quit my job had I known what life would be like. However, now I have both. I feel that being a professor was what impressed her, because she is out of my league. Education pays. I'm going to be one of those people who answers the question even though it didn't happen to me. There was a girl at my high school who was known to be in a relationship with one of the male teachers. No one really knows if they were in love or just fucking. But she always hung out with a group of friends in his classroom, basically at every break that class wasn't going on. I guess at some point she started hanging out there by herself as well, and things turned into something more than just friendly. I hung out in there a few times during lunch and they would make blatant sexual remarks to each other, touch each other in ways that were way past a line of student/teacher, and just overall make it obvious that something was going on. The administration eventually questioned the teacher about it and he didn't come back the next year. TLDR, girl hung out with male teacher and eventually ended up fucking him, then made it well known to the whole school. Uni professor. Saw this guy on Grindr when I lived on campus and thought his body looked pretty hot. Messaged him, said he was a professor on campus so I had to send my pic first, found out the DPT he taught in and it was mine, sent my picture on the promise he would, sent it, says he never realized I was bi, and he always thought I was fit, sent his. Says bring a towel and meet at X office in 15 minutes, met in his office, sucked me off, fucked him. Start of a great FWB relationship. Banged out my English teacher after graduation in her minivan in the middle of nowhere. We had gone for drinks and things went from there. She was married. Unfortunately for me the van got stuck in mud and we called for a tow. Ironically, the tow guy was a firefighter who worked with her husband. Things went downhill from there. Edit, of course. My top Reddit comment is about sex with my teacher. And regardless of the moral implications of what happened, as I don't condone infidelity, her husband was an abusive alcoholic she was separating from. Doesn't make it okay, but things aren't so black and white when you're young. Later guys, I'd been working for a professor as an undergrad for a couple years, and we'd be close. It wasn't a sexual relationship, but there weren't ever any boundaries. I'd been working for him for about a month when the topic of my birth control came up and he chastised me for not knowing what chemicals were involved, how my birth control worked, etc. It was one of the most awkward conversations ever, because he's my boss. But he felt that it was important I know. Fast forward to senior year, 2 years after being hired. I've recently broken off my engagement. Fiancé had expected me to move back to my hometown and be a housewife. That was simply a no-go. I was feeling rebellious and decided to get my nipples pierced. The piecing itself went fine, but 2 days later I realized I was in shock, and needed help. I had 0 friends, no car to go to ER in. Professor had put himself through grad school as a physical therapist and figured he had the medical training to help. He chastised me for deforming my body, but dressed the wounds, kissed the top of my head, and left. Somehow, that response meant I needed to chase him. I think the attraction was somewhat mutual because he kept coming by to check on the healing progress. We started watching movies together, then cuddling, then having sex. The relationship lasted 6 years until cancer took him, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him and miss him terribly. I'm a teacher. If this gets any serious answers, all I can say is _. Do professors count? You didn't specify as to what type of teacher, so I'm just going to assume so. In grad school I was an research assistant for a professor in her late 30s. Brilliant woman. Gorgeous redhead. Lots of sexual tension, you could tell there was mutual attraction. Our relationship gradually veered into the personal, we would get lunch, drinks together, talk about personal things. Deep shit like the purpose of life. Her husband, also a professor, was away for the week-on conference. We had a meeting to discuss a project of mine, she rescheduled to her home. I had an idea what might be up. I arrived to a cliché, she opened the door in a robe, naked underneath, dropped the robe once we got inside, she looked me in the eyes and asked me if I wanted to go to bed with her. We had a sexual relationship for the 2 years until I graduated. I graduated and haven't seen her since. My career took me away. How do I feel about it now? Don't think of it that often. When do I miss her, as a person, not just the sex. One of the few people I've actually considered to be a friend in my life. One of the 3 women I've developed feelings for. Edit, and this is now my highest rated comment. Liars of Reddit, tell me a lie. Probably should be marked serious. I didn't have sex with him while I was a student, it happened while I was in college, but I did hook up with my former PE teacher from middle school. He was the first real crush I ever had, and I say that because I was 12 when little girl "oh he's so handsome" started mixing with dangerous sexual desires. And he was one of the sexiest men I have ever met. Incredibly fit, strong features, and his smile made every girl in the class sploosh. He seriously could have been a model if he was taller. Anyways, of course, nothing happened while I was in school. That would have creepy, but it's not like I didn't fantasize about it all the time. Joined our volleyball and soccer team, which he coached, in the hopes that I would impress him, also always wore little volleyball shorts during practice. I worked harder in school because my pubescent mind thought that I could prove to him I was a mature woman if I worked hard enough. I was kind of delusional, but suddenly having boobs does. Describe it, but basically signaled the point of no return. Why think 30 minutes we were in his house, on his bed, just going it at it. The sex was okay, but the fact that he used to be my teacher, that I had a crush on him and had imagined this moment so many times as a teen just made it mind-blowingly amazing. Never TA-ed for him, obviously. Thanks for fulfilling my teenage dreams, Coach Hardy. That to a teenage girl. He was really sweet, and I spent a lot of time around him. I would sometimes spend my recesses talking to him, never alone. I was always with my friends, who also had crushes on him. A few times he told me he thought my name was pretty and that his great aunt who died when she was 4 had the same name too. Now that I look back, it was actually kind of creepy, but at the time I thought it meant we were destined to be together. He left the school midway through 8th grade, and by that time my crush on him waned. I also had my first boyfriend at the time, so he took up all my attention. Fast forward to the end of my sophomore year in college, I was back home for break and was meeting up with friends from high school. I had finally turned 21, the last one of our group, and decided to go have drinks at the restaurant/bar downtown right by the movie theater. You had to go up the bar to order, and since I was young and excited about being able to legally order drinks, I was the self-designated runner. So I'm at the bar trying to get the bartender's attention, who's currently talking to another dude, and I notice that the guy is familiar. I could only see one side of his face, but when he turned I immediately realized that it was my old PE coach. He was still cute, though older and a lot shorter than I remembered. Being intoxicated, I decided that it would be a magnificent idea to go talk to the guy who only taught me for 2.5 years. I was like, "Hey coach," and grabbed his shoulder to get his attention. He didn't recognize me, but as soon as I explained who I was and where I went to school, his face lit up. "The Lady May, I remember. Something something something." I had many mojitos by that point and wasn't paying attention. I was distracted by the thought that I had just met my girlhood crush at a bar, like a rom-com cliché. We spent a few minutes talking. I told him about school, how I was looking for teachers' programs. I wasn't studying to become a teacher, but my intended career path required teaching experience, and being back for the summer. He said his sister, she is significantly younger than he was, had graduated from the local community college, so he was there with his family celebrating yada yada. I told him to tell her congrats, and I was about to go back to my table, totally forgot about the drinks lol, when he asked for my number. I was a little stunned, but then he said he could probably set me up at the school he was currently at. He wasn't coaching anymore and was actually teaching classes, as a TA, and just needed some contact info. Alcohol makes me believe that I'm the world's greatest seductress, so I tried to be super flirty. I said something like, "I'll give you my number for pleasure reasons." Yeah, the world's greatest seductress. He laughed probably at me and told me I'll hear from him. We exchanged numbers and parted, and the rest of the night went okay. A week later, I text him about possibly TAing at the school. I was in full networking mood and wasn't really thinking about my stupid flirting attempt. He texted me back a few hours later saying we could meet up for coffee and discuss me possibly TAing for him during summer school. I was a young and inexperienced youth, so I had no idea if this was unusual or not, so I agreed. We met up that weekend for coffee and probably 10 minutes was spent on talking about the job. He kept asking me questions about my bit late to the game. I was 17, legal age of consent in Ireland where I am from. She was a 23-year-old 5 feet 2 inches beautiful French teacher, bonus points as she was actually French. I was quite good at French, and when we had practice sessions for our oral exam speaking French to an examiner, I always flirted like crazy with her. On the last day of school I got to talking to her and told her that I needed a coffee and to come with me. She did, and we hit it off. We met up several times, and the night before she had to head back France I made my move and ended up doing diddly all night. Rumors got spread around as we were seen together several times, and the whole town knew in the end. Ended up going out for about 6 months before I met my current girlfriend in university. It came to an end and I still look fondly back at our time together. As a bonus fact, I am now a teacher at the school where this all happened, and all the teachers always tease me about it in the staff room. Smile. This thread has thoroughly convinced me to be very wary of marrying a teacher. Way too many stories of cheating. I don't know if this fits here, but had sex with my ex-teacher. Here's my thread. This happened a little over 2 years ago. I was the teacher, 25 years old and teaching ESL while working on my master's. In walks this 20-year-old Brazilian girl who proceeded to fuck me all semester, couldn't even look at her. I would be trying to teach, scanning the room and making eye contact, and here she is waving her leg up and down, finger in mouth. The other students probably thought, "Oh, absent-minded professor lost his train of thought again." As I'm sweating bullets and trying to get my pulse rate down. At this point I knew shit was gonna go down eventually. The day the semester ended we took the Pound Town Express for 18 straight hours. We're now happily married and expecting our first child in November. Edit, clarification and a hyphen. Thanks you/Ray-Z. Throwaway account. The stories here so far all seem to be about young guys banging their really hot sexy professors. sorry, but there won't be many saucy details in my story, but I just wanted to put it out there. I am currently in a relationship with my university professor. He is almost 30 years older than me. I am in the mid to late 20s. It was a serious thing from the beginning. When I enrolled into university, I was a little older than most of the students because I had worked before deciding to go to school full-time. We first met during a mandatory interview as part of the application process. Being older than most of the applicants and being a little bit more matured probably made me stand out, I guess. I remember thinking that he was a little weird at first, but we ended up having a really enjoyable chat about the subject I was going to major in during the interview. I didn't think much of it though, and was just glad that the interview went well. We didn't talk again about our long-term future, because I am not sure if it will ever be possible for us to conduct our relationship openly. But in any case, I'm happy with us now. Until I was accepted a few months later and I saw him in the second week of class. Not having studied in a while, I was a little rusty and struggled at first with the rigorous curriculum, so I took the initiative to make appointments with the lecturers for the modules I was having problems with. He was one of them. It is a small private university and classes were small too, so after one or two such appointments, he definitely knew who I was. As in, I wasn't just another face in the lecture theatre, to him. He was a very popular lecturer in school, brilliant, great sense of humor and dedicated. He was well liked and adored by his students, both current and past. I thought he was a good teacher. I thought most of my lecturers were good teachers actually, but wasn't as impressed by him as my classmates were. And anyway, I was there to study and get my degree. It was pretty much the only thing I was focused on, and I wasn't there to date anyone, much less a professor. Sometime during the middle of the academic year, I made an appointment to meet with him to go over questions and to clear my doubts. I absolutely hated it when I couldn't understand a concept no matter how much I tried, regardless of subject, and would always try to clear it up as soon as possible. We would normally meet on campus, but this one time it was a public holiday long weekend, so campus wasn't opened. So he asked if I would be comfortable meeting at his place instead. He assured me it would be completely safe and we can go over as much material as we wanted. By this time of the year, we had already been exchanging emails rather frequently, talking about pretty much everything under the sun. I got the feeling that he liked me, but I tried not to read too much into it. I was starting to like him too. I cautiously accepted his suggestion, but at the same time not wanting to come off as having a silly schoolgirl crush. That day at his place could probably be considered the first day of our relationship. We went through a ton of study material, then talked about films, TV shows, then went out to have a simple dinner. Nothing else happened, but there was definitely something between us. We were both just excited and very happy to be in each other's company. Shortly after this first date, we went out to dinner again, and he looked straight at me and confessed his feelings for me. I did the same. I had been in a really crappy relationship about 3 years prior to this also, with an older man, although not quite as old, and I'd since been very wary about men in general. He had been divorced for about a decade and had pretty much been a loner and a bit of a social recluse outside of his work. In terms of personality, interests, general opinion about things, we are a good fit. It felt like I had found the one person I could finally let my walls down with and be safe, and clearly he felt the same. As for the physical part of the relationship, other than holding hands and kissing, we didn't do much after that second date. We both hadn't been sexually active in years. The physical attraction was definitely there, but I wanted to be really sure before we took things to that level. He was fine with waiting. When it finally happened though, technically, it wasn't impressive, to be honest, lol, but we cuddled and talked for ages after that. Things in the bedroom have since improved, of course, through practice. I've just graduated from university, and he know. This was when I was about 22-23. I'm 31 now. I was attending community college and my Japanese teacher, she was 39 and unhappily married, about to get divorced, so about a 16-year difference. She says we can get extra credit if we go to some Japanese movie showing. If I recall correctly, I was the only one that went, or maybe one other, but they didn't stick around long. Afterwards we talked about. I was new to the whole area and had no friends, so I told her if she ever wanted to hang out on the weekends I'd be happy to. I didn't really think it would happen. So long story short, we go to another one of those movies and she invited 2 of her friends. So now we have hung out 2 times outside of school. I call her and say we should meet on Saturday. We meet near a beach and have brunch and some mimosas. I'm a bit tipsy and I thought we were gonna go in the water. She didn't bring her swimsuit though. I buy her a swimsuit and we go in. I kinda grab her waist while we're in there, pretending like it's just to keep her from drifting too far away, but I knew what I was doing. We go out and I help her clean her feet of sand. I later found out this was when she said she liked me. I ask her to come to my house for some glasses of wine, so we do. My roommate was out of town for that week. In hindsight I kinda wish he wasn't because I regret doing it, but at the time I was happy about it. We talk about past relationships etc. I get up, maybe to refill my glass, I don't remember, and sit down next to her. There's a moment of silence and I just go in for the kiss. I was tipsy, maybe drunk, and just went for it. I thought worst case she denies me, but I wouldn't get in trouble because she came to my house for drinks, and she would get in trouble too from the school probably. So then I start fingering her, and here is when I was like, OMFG, I am doing this with my teacher. She wasn't attractive by the way, and maybe that's partly why I regret it. The only reason was I thought it was so cool that I could get with a teacher. Also at this time in my life I had horrible social anxiety unless I was drunk. We go upstairs, and we start doing it. There was about 2 months left in the semester of the class where I go 2 days a week. I remember it as a stressful time. I go back to my hometown for the week and I get a call from her which I ignore because I'm with my family. I obviously couldn't explain why I would be taking calls from my teacher on the weekends, so I just ignored it. I call her when I get back and she starts crying. This is when I was like, oh fucking shit, she's crazy, I gotta get out. I thought it was obvious I didn't want a relationship, look at our age difference. So then I forget how it came up, but she got mad and said, do you think I'm going to give you a good grade just because of what happened? Which I did actually, but I said, no. So anyway, I get through the next 2 months and we didn't talk again. To answer the question, I don't have many feelings about it now. I know during that time my social anxiety was so bad, I wanted anything to make me feel more confident. But right after I did it I felt kinda dirty. And to think I never thought I would get to tell anybody about this. I was a junior in high school and I had enrolled in a class called service learning which counted as college credit. Essentially, every day from 10 AM to 11 AM I would get a bus that would take me over to the local elementary school where I would tutor kids in 3rd grade. I would help them with everything from reading and spelling to math. Each class had a teacher, obviously. The teacher of the class of kids that I would tutor was a young, blonde, dyed, not natural, brown-eyed beauty. She was really cool and was super nice to me. While the kids were working on projects and such, we would talk about things like music and movies, and then one day she brought up relationships. I played baseball in high school and the day before I slid into second base and the shortstop covering second missed the ball and it hit me in the neck, leaving a small bruise the next day. We were sitting at a table in the back of the close to our area since it was getting late, but then, as I was thinking of places, she grabbed my face, turned it to her and started to kiss me. No tongue, just lips on lips, but hard kissing, very firm kisses. I went right back at it. I started to kiss her back and then quickly looked around to make sure nobody was looking when I realized we were in a semi-dark parking lot with nobody around. I started kissing her neck and she said nibble it, but don't leave a mark. So, I did just that. I nibbled on her neck and then as I was getting more brave I went to go up her shirt and under her bra, but the bra was way too tight for me to get my hands underneath and I didn't want it to feel like I was forcing my way in, so I stopped. She pulled her bra up over her tits and lifted her shirt, and then I saw the most exquisite pair of tits I'd ever seen. I saw like 3 pairs in person before this. I went to start sucking on her nipples and she pushed up her tits to reach my mouth. It was awkward. In the car trying to maneuver my body enough to get in the right position, so she said wait and pulled her shirt down and adjusted her bra back over her tits. Then, she asked me to put my seat back. I went back as far as I could go and she tried to unbuckle my belt but was having a hard time, so I did it for her and pulled out my dick. I just assumed that she was going to go down on me, but instead she gave me one hell of an epic hand job. I honestly wasn't a big fan of hand jobs, but holy shit, she knew what she was doing. I came, of course, and she asked me if I had any napkins or something to clean her hands off with. I told her I had some tissues in the glove compartment, and as she was cleaning her hands I asked her for a tissue to clean myself off because some was on me too. As I go to grab a tissue, she leans over and literally licks the little bit of cum off of my thumb. I was in my glory and I did not want the night to end, but it did. We cleaned up and I drove her home. Talking about what we just did the whole way home and how I could never tell anybody, and I promised. When I dropped her off she gave me a kiss and told me I was a good person and she was glad she had met me, and then said good night. That was it. The rest of the school year we didn't mention what happened once. I remember I dropped a crayon in the classroom once, and when I bent over to pick it up she said the jeans I was wearing made my butt look nice, but even then, that's all that happened. Afterwards, years later, I went to a party for a friend's girlfriend's birthday party and she was there, with her newly engaged fiancé. We didn't talk once, not a hi, not a hello, nothing. I remember that night at the ballpark like it was yesterday, and I always will. Classroom cutting out stars from red construction paper when she looked at me and said attacked by a vacuum cleaner. I was so embarrassed, but I thought it was cool that she was that loose with me to talk about that kind of stuff. I told her what had really happened and she laughed and said yeah, I used to make up some funny stories too. I laughed again and told her that really was what had happened, and she looked at me and smiled. She then told me that the class as a whole had won a competition months earlier and that the prize was for the whole class to go to a Trenton Thunder, Yankees minor league baseball game together, which was coming up. She said the kids would love it if I could go, so I said sure, it would be a lot of fun. She asked me if I drove and I said I did, baby blue 1981 Mitsubishi, and then she gave me her address and told me to pick her up. 2 weekends later the night of the game came up and I remember it being an absolutely gorgeous night. I told I never had sex with a teacher, but I am pretty sure I turned down a chance with my high school librarian. She had just gone through a nasty divorce and was now banging my math teacher. I had to complete some volunteer hours to graduate, so I popped into the library to see if she had any work for me. She said she had a storage room that needed organizing. So she leads me to the storage room and closes the door behind her. The whole time she was being kind of flirty, but I was a pretty social guy and was used to people being like that, and was probably a little oblivious too. Well, anyways, she tells me what she needs done, which is probably only about 30 minutes to an hour worth of work. I need a bunch of hours, so I was like, is there anything else I can do for you? She puts her hand on my shoulder and says, what were you thinking of? All the while she's giving me some serious fuck me eyes. My head was racing. She's banging my math teacher and the whole school knows. Also, I had this feeling she just wanted me to say something so she could feel wanted and then she would shoot me down. So I made a quick decision to not pursue and said, well, I need lots of hours and this isn't much work. Is there any more work to get done around here? She backed off and said, not really, just come see me when you're done here. When I was done the work about 30 minutes later, I went to her office and she wrote me a note for 10 hours of volunteer service and thanked me for the help. I went and told my experience to my friends and they all told me I should have gone for it. I probably should have, oh well. The only thing I regret is that I'll never know what her intentions were. To be completely honest, at the time I felt like the king of the world, the most badass man on the planet. I had done what every kid in our school was dreaming of. I had sex with the hottest teacher in school. This was only 4 years ago, and now I feel like the victim of a really fucked up emotional circus in which I was severely blackmailed and brainwashed into thinking I was in love with a married woman 25 years older than me. Op just wants fap material. I taught high school for 7 years. My second year, I was 23 and teaching 9th and 10th grades but sponsoring a club with students from each grade. One student in the club I sponsored was an 18-year-old senior. During the spring semester, we took a field trip out of state for 4 days. The entire 4 days, this student followed me around like a puppy dog. He knocked on my hotel room door no fewer than 12 times in 4 days. I was young and new to everything, and hadn't yet learned how to navigate delicate situations. But I wasn't stupid, and his pupils dilated every time he talked to me, and it was very obviously a crush. So, being absolutely terrified of what would happen if rumors spread, and not being terribly emotionally mature myself, I went aggressively harsh on him. I was very afraid that a single iota of softness would either encourage him or get the rumor mill started. So starting when he knocked on my hotel room door, I just rode his ass about every little detail, making sure that absolutely none of it led to any extended time in my classroom or, God forbid, time alone with me. It seemed to work. He stopped flirting and put his head down and handled business. When he graduated, I received a fantastically elegant greeting card with a handwritten thank you for demanding excellence when others accepted mediocrity, and so on. This story would reflect much better on me if it ended there. The student out in a semester and a half at the local community college before deciding that it wasn't for him and joining the US military. I didn't know anything about it until one day I was out in a local nightlife hotspot and he walked in fatigues. He was home on Liberty before tech school. As soon as he saw me, he was on me like white on rice. And I'm ashamed to say that it was then that I began to cave. He looked goddamned incredible after basic, and I was responding physiologically to his attention, even as my mind protested. I managed to extract myself from that situation without fucking up too terribly badly. I did dance with him a little but made some flimsy excuse for not being able to see him again during the coming week. Crisis averted. Except 2 years minus 1 day later, he came trotting into my life again. He was home for a week on leave and then his unit was deploying. He went to his old school to find me, but I had switched to another school. So he went there to find me, and find me he did. It was 1 hour before my planning period, so he waited in the main office for me and then we walked around campus talking. He was a man now. He wasn't being overtly flirtatious now, and even though I was now attracted to him, he actually seemed less attracted to me. So when he asked me if he could take me to dinner to thank me for the influence I had on him, and insisted that it was absolutely how he wanted to spend an evening before his first deployment, I said yes. He had flowers and wine waiting on the table at the restaurant when I arrived. He stood up and pulled out my chair and told me I looked beautiful. And then, before he took his own seat again, he bent over and kissed my cheek. Sploosh. We had a date and sex every night that week, and then he deployed. And deployed again. And when he returned home the 4th time, it was for good. We're Facebook friends now, so I got to watch as he transitioned from military to first responder, and as he dated and fell in love with his now wife. It is my deepest hope that he feels much less guilt and inner conflict over our affair than I do. I still don't understand how I can be so not proud of what I did and also remember it with such affection. Does my past count? That Veronica Vaughn was one piece of ace. Trust me, I know from experience. Since year 7 I knew exactly what I was going to do after school. I was to become a software engineer, so I did the bare minimum on everything besides maths and computer programming, but luckily English was compulsory. I hated it right up until the very end. Year 12 comes around and I fucking despised English because unlike maths the answer could be yes, No, maybe or possibly, and if I tried I would do bad, and if I didn't try I would do bad, so I stuck with the latter. I actually got a really awesome teacher who made the class fun for the last semester of school, but she was really overweight and would not come to class a lot, so this made English even better because it meant we had heaps of free periods. Some goody two-shoes chicks in my class told the school after a week that we haven't been taught anything in the past week because of our absent teacher. This meant the school hired a semi-permanent relief teacher for the rest of the year. Fresh out of her master's degree in English. Not really a qualified teacher, so she was in her mid to late 20s, massive tits with a fit body, and would wear tight sweaters and tank top. Holy fuck, it was good. Me and my mate were entranced. The rest of the class didn't notice because they were try-hard Asians and girls who tried even harder. This school was renowned nationally for getting really good marks, so kinda understandable to be so try-hard since this relief teacher was straight out of uni and knew about this school's reputation. She came in guns blazing, setting crazy amounts of homework and marked assignments and tests with the standards of university, and me being me, I did barely anything. Really surprised I passed the class, but maybe later we will know why. Because me and my mate didn't do any work unless it was assessed, we usually got told to stay after class. After a while my friend got sick of staying after class and started doing the work, so it ended up just being me and her. Now that I look back on it, I think there was some mild sexual tension between us. However, nothing really kicked off. The end of year exams are coming up and I need to go to the local office works to buy a new scientific calculator. Searching through the aisles, and lo and behold, she is right there. We say hi and start making conversation about school and stuff. I say bye, then she stops me in my tracks and asks for a ride home because she isn't actually from the town and has been using the shitty public transport for all this time, and she hasn't got around to buying a car yet. I say sure, but I was planning on getting some coffee because I got the maths exam tomorrow and need that kick. She said it doesn't matter and will pay for my coffee in exchange for the lift, so I agreed. We get to the coffee shop and I order a quad shot espresso, and that costs around $7, but she paid for it anyways. She got something for herself, I don't know. More conversation, then I take her home and offers me a glass water. Inside. Go in, sit on the couch, she gives me the water, she sits real close, and then boom, out of nowhere, we are making out. A solid 15 minutes later, half undressed, she stops and says, "No, we can't do this. We might get in serious trouble." We exchange numbers and I leave. I don't see her for about a week after that because seniors only have to go for exams. It is the day of the English exam and I have done no study, and the exam isn't until 1:30 p.m, so I sit at home and wait. Although at around 9 a.m. I got a text from her saying that she wants to try again at her house for a bit of good luck. I don't think I have driven so fast and so hard, if you know what I mean, ever before. I get to hers and cut straight to the chase and we start fucking all over the house. I don't think I have nutted more in my life, and so many times. Because before that it was usually when parents were in the house with us, so it had to be stealth. At around 12 p.m. I drop her off close to school, but not at school to not raise suspicion. I do my exam and did the bare minimum. I was meant to write 1,500 words and I only did 400 words because it counts as a valid attempt. I also remember before the exam it wasn't going to be moderated unless you asked. We got our score back and I got 75% on the exam, so a B grade, and I am pretty sure it wasn't because of my essay. The funniest bit about it all is that I searched her on Facebook and turns out she's in a relationship. Well, good luck to them. Both. ITT, a lot of pedophilia and abuse. I clicked this with the horny young man brain, and left being reminded of how horrible and manipulative people can be. Skeptical. Don't know if I should even bother with the trouble of telling y'all, but fuck it. I'm currently married to the woman that was, at one time, my high school English teacher. AMA. When I was 17 I had a short sexual relationship with my high school English teacher. She was the hot teacher, but in reality, look back now, probably a 6.5 at most. She lived in my neighborhood, and if occasional run into her walking her dogs and talked frequently outside of school. I went to her house a couple times to help her with small tasks, or she'd invite me over for lunch/dinner on the weekends sometimes. One of those times I was sitting on her couch and she sort of just got close to me and we started kissing and went from there. At the time I just felt like, oh yeah, I'm mature. She sees me as an equal. She was probably late 20s, so I just thought, oh yeah, I'm the man. No shit, she wants to hang out with me and have a relationship with me. Again, I was 17 at the time and was in long-term relationships through high school, so I fell in love and thought it would be a long-term thing. She quickly, I think, realized what would happen long-term if she kept this up, but I swore I would never tell anyone because I loved her. I never did, except to my friends who didn't believe me anyways. Thinking back, she's definitely got some things wrong with her that's not normal, but to say it affected me or hurt/damaged me would be complete BS. I am somewhat proud of it though, like a badge of honor no one believes to see. I dated my college professor. I went to his office hours any chance I could, even though I didn't need to. It was pretty obvious there was a mutual attraction. We would end up talking instead of studying, which quickly turned to flirting. I can't specifically remember how it became physical, but when I look back it's almost like a cliché movie scene. We sort of awkwardly looked at each other, then started making out. I don't know if it was him who went for it, or me, or both of us at the same time. If anyone wants more details into our relationship, I'll be happy to post. But I really don't like thinking about those times, especially if no one really cares. Not surprising that it did not turn out to be successful in the end. Not quite on topic, but a history teacher at my old high school was banging one of his students and proposed to her shortly after she graduated. They're married now with a kid, both teaching at the same high school where she was his student. Throwaway. A currently ongoing situation which I like but am also feeling super shitty about. Not technically a student, but he's my mentor, a big name in my field, and 40 years my senior. I'm in a relationship. He's been married longer than I've been alive. Everything started normally enough. He brought me on because of my interest in our shared field at an event we both attended a few years ago. He has made my interest grow by orders of magnitude because he's the best teacher and we have the exact same type of humor. Mentor/mentee relationship turned more toward friendship, and then about a year ago I realized I had feelings for him. Then I realized he was acting a bit different around me. We would hug before I left. I only see him once every few months and work there for a week or two, and one time he kissed me, which kind of cemented things. He told me he thinks about what might happen between us. We've only kissed a couple of times and I know we both want more, but we both know what's between us is wrong, so nothing more has happened. Ugh. I feel like a terrible person, but at the same time I feel like I'd be missing out on being with such an overall amazing man. So right now we are trying to work together and ignore what we have, but there's clearly a lot of tension, and for me it's getting painful knowing we can never be together. Also more and more painful having to regularly interact with his wife. He's never met my so. Nobody will see this probably, but I needed to get it off my chest. /writing prompts. I attended a slightly upmarket school in England which had around 70 boarders who lived in a manor house a couple of miles away, where I was also a boarder. We had permanent staff there, cooks, cleaners, etc. And one day in my last year there, so I was 16, a new cook started. And she was pretty cute. Slender, ginger, that oh so pale skin, freckles. Just not my type at all. But hey, I was 16, she was female and in her mid-20s, so I hit on her all the time. The cooks lived in the old stables, which had been converted to housing. Under cover of darkness, I had to tiptoe along, and gently tap the door so none of the other staff in adjacent buildings heard us. Well, that was the plan and it worked the first couple of times, but then one night there was a furious banging on the door as we were in the midst of making the two-backed beast. I had to go out of the bedroom window to escape. Threw my clothes out first, then climbed down, fell off a drain pipe and made my escape. Well, not actually. I was in a walled rose garden. You've seen this type of layout on BBC period dramas. I was running around, carrying my clothes, trying find an unlocked gate, smile found one, then around the house, dressing as I ran, hopped, fell over and climbed up the fire escape onto the balcony outside my dorm window, then tapping the glass to wake one of the other guys up to let me in. Took my shirt and shoes off, scrambled into bed just seconds before the dorm door burst open and the lights came on and the housemaster strode in trying to find the culprit. I got away with it too. She claimed there hadn't been anyone with her, the school had an idea who it might have been and she left shortly after. I finished that school year and my dad got a letter suggesting that my time at that school had probably come to an end. That's English for go fuck yourself, kiddo, and don't come back. How do I feel about it now? Great, it was an excellent period of my life. I've attached a Google map link. You can see the stables to the west of the property, and the rose garden is now just a flat lawn area, but still walled in, and my dorm was right at the front of the house facing east. https://www.google.com/maps/place/maple+haze/at52 6,838,155-1 8,585,248, 126 meters/day2 equals !3 M1 !1 E3 !4 M5 !3 M4 !1 S0 by 4,870 A7636 CF641:0 XD6 C75 to 4D4 C4 car 77. 8 square meters !3D 52. 6838871 4 D1. 8,584,081. _ This girl I went to school with kissed our young cool teacher while she was in school, then they eventually had sex. They ended up dating and getting married after she graduated though. They've been together over 10 years with a happy family and shit. I've never known a sleazy situation to turn out so tasteful in the end. He just happened to find the one sitting in his classroom. Of course, their official story is that they didn't do anything until after she graduated and turned 18. It was kind of weird because she was the teacher's pet and we joke about them messing around, but they actually did it. I lost my virginity to a teacher in high school. She was my English teacher freshman year, and it was her first year teaching. She paid extra attention to me, and would always lean in over my desk to talk during quiet reading time. One day she wore a very deep V-neck shirt and no bra. I told her I could see down her shirt. I was an awkward kid, and she told me she knew. I slept with her the next week. Literally the best sex I had up until I met my wife. Definitely recommend it. A girl that I was on the speech team with in high school turned out to be having sex with one of the coaches. He was a guy that was supremely overweight and ended up losing the majority of it, but he always had a very playful and borderline inappropriate relationship with students, particularly females. But everyone just thought he was the goofy, relatable kind of guy that was easier to talk to than most teachers. He was particularly close to this girl, who he specifically coached, and they spent a lot of time together. She would also skip class to go hang out with him. Everyone including myself thought their relationship was oddly close, but most people brushed it off as that's how he was with a lot of people. The story came out when they eventually found a love letter written by him to the girl. She was 16 at the time their relationship began, and he stated that he wanted to wait until they were 18, but kissed her anyway. They proceeded to meet up for sex on multiple occasions, one time being in his house when his daughter was home. I had him as a teacher during the time he was convicted, and I remember it being like a scene from a movie once the news broke. It was the only thing people were talking about. His mugshot was pulled up on everyone's phones, people claiming they always knew this would happen, etc. Me and a few other people that had a close relationship with the guy were actually taken by counselors out of class so they could talk with us and see how we were doing. Flash forward to now, the teacher is about halfway through his sentence. The girl took her life about a year ago. Whether or not this whole situation was the main cause behind that was unspecified, but I'm sure it really screwed her up. Having known both of them pretty well, it's all still very surreal to me. Not a student, I'm actually a teacher. I'm pretty sure the guy was retarded, and he had some odd deformities. Yellowish skin, weird boxy head and scrawny limbs, definitely not my proudest moment, but due to my weight he was all I could get, so why the hell not? Also, he lived in a pineapple under the sea. I don't believe a single post in this thread. Why stop at teachers? The entire education system has fucked me, D. I had sex with my TA while in university. I know that this doesn't count, but she was super hot and I just wanted to brag about. Also, she was super hot, and I had sex with her. I never fucked a teacher, but I tried. Mr. Blum. He was so sexy. He was, guys, I'm gonna quit teaching and become a firefighter hot. Anyway, I would always sit in the front row, wear a tiny skirt and a cute thong and purposely make sure he could see them. I wanted to fuck him so bad. I'm sad it never happened. I still fantasize about it. This'll get buried, but a male teacher at my school asked out a friend of mine at prom in front of other students. That much was common knowledge, but known only to a few is that they ended up dating, and yes, having sex. Used to role play as student/teacher. Wasn't even the first student he dated from the school. His ex-wife was a student at the school he taught at previous to mine. It started when she was 15, if you believe her family. He recently was acquitted of raping a student who ended up suicidal and told staff at a new school, and is now being heralded as an exemplary teacher and a victim of evil little brats and a witch hunt. They're raising money for him to rebuild his life. A girl who killed herself had been taken under his wing in the months before, and he was giving lots of pep talks to her at lunchtime. Make of that what you will. Coincidence, or a factor to be through on, considering habitual grooming of students? Nobody cares, because he comes from a wealthy family and knows lots of people in the media who write lovingly and of course without bias about how he is a wonderful man. Nobody even cares that he is known to have married a student, and thus clearly has at least one record of fraternizing with students. When I think back to how helpful and thoughtful and charming he was to me, I want to scrub my skin raw. He is free to teach. I pray to God that he doesn't pick yet another girls' school to dote on. Why are there this many people that can answer this question? ITT, male rape victims realizing they were actually abused. Freshman year of college, I was handling the loss of my father horribly and started struggling with my classes. I went to my English professor's office one day for guidance about an assignment, and we ended up talking about life. She confided in me that she was struggling with a messy divorce. The office visits became routine and the highlight of my school day, where we just entertained and consoled each other through whatever shit life was throwing at us. We developed an intense mutual attraction, and then finally near the end of the semester, she invited me over for a home-cooked dinner while her kids were away. We drank wine with dinner and ended up snuggling and tickling each other on the couch, which turned into making out, and then I carried her to her bedroom and we had sex. I'd only had sex once before that, when I lost my virginity during the summer break after HS graduation, but what I lacked in experience I made up for with stamina and enthusiasm. I remember Googling how to please an older woman days before the big night. She was very nice about my inexperience though, and ended up teaching me a lot about fucking over the course of several months. We kept things on the down low, naturally, and never became a real couple. She met and fell in love with a pilot and married him, but we still message each other once in a while. She was 39 and I was 18 the first time we had sex. Her friendship played such a major role in my coping with my father's loss. I will always treasure how we were able to support each other during that difficult time. I'm probably late, but anyways. I played handball since I was a little kid, started with 8, and was pretty good. Our whole team in general was pretty famous in the region cause our men's squad played too. Bundesliga, and so did our women's squad. My squad was pretty successful too. One of the ladies in the women's squad was my sports and geography teacher. She was about 30 back then and played in the second team of our women's squad, not as high but still successful. So for me it was weird to grow up. I knew her since I was a little lad, and when I switched to the gymnasium she even became my teacher for overall 5 years, 7th, 9th, 11th, 12th, 13th grade or whatever it's called in English. Funnily enough, when I took geography as one of my primary subjects for the obiter in the 12th grade she became my teacher there as well. Overall I was pretty lucky, because I got along super well with her and had always struggled to season her in school while in the school gym. Outside of years nothing happened. I was with my GF for some more months after this magical evening. Also lost my virginity to her. All was fine. But since I got to know my teacher now in a different way, I developed a huge crush on her. And it turned me on that she liked the way I look at her. I knew she enjoyed it, how attractive I found her cause she always had her flirty smile for me. And here and there a lip biting as well. It became more and more intense since my body also changed a lot. I became more and more fit and we started dating when I was 17. But I wrote enough for now. If anyone is interested how the sex thingy started, just leave a comment. ATM, I'm not sure if anyone reads this anyway, so I go back to lurking. School, I doozed her. She was a pretty gorgeous woman. Super fit, obviously, blonde hair, freckles and a big smile. She's also super flirty in private and enjoys her life in general. Now you have to know that for me and many others, handball was just our life back then. We trained a lot during the week and spent like every weekend with having games or watching games of our girls' squads or the professional games of our men and women's squads. I have no idea if any of you plays handball, but since it's super common to hang out a lot and develop into a second family, everyone knows you and you know everyone. We even went camping once a year. So you go there with most of your squads, mostly 14-18-year-old teams and 1 to 2 of the adult teams, and play a cup for a whole weekend, competing with many other teams. One time we camped, I was 15 by the time, the female B team went with us. My teacher was part of the team and so she hung around with us as well. I had my first girlfriend back in the days. I was a damn talented handball player and many people loved me. We even had about 200 to 300 people watching our games. However, I was a quite silent lad. I always was. And while some girls of my school and handball showed interest for me since I was 14, it took me 1 year to get a girlfriend. She was the first that really was so obvious that she liked me and wanted to be with me that I finally noticed a sign of a girl. I wasn't smart back then. Like, I'm dumb when girls flirt with me. I don't know what they want. I'm still pretty goofy. Back in the days I just focused on school and handball. So it was a big deal for me to have a girlfriend. She was pretty hot too. And played obviously handball too. Okay, so we went camping and in the first evening, Friday, everyone drank a bit. Obviously no hard stuff for me since I was just 15. We talked and had fun. Now I know you'd like to see that. This was the first time I banged my teacher this night, but nope. Sorry. It was just the first time she flirted with me. She asked me about how everything goes with my girlfriend. Told me about her first love back in my age. And that it was a handball player too, and how exciting it is to have a relationship. And somehow even with some drinks she was still smart enough to play mind games. She definitely wanted to make me horny. That was the first time I realized it. Somehow the good old times stories changed to, oh man, I did so many silly things when I was younger, but it wasn't creepy. We didn't talk about sex all the time. She just threw it in between the conversation. But we also talked about school and my future. And I asked her about her future and what she planned to do. And this stuff. I mean, it was a super awesome and relaxed conversation. And I felt so good about it. She also said she appreciated I was the product of a student-teacher relationship. My mom was introduced by her friend to her professor, my dad. While they were dating, she took classes under him. Doesn't really count as much, but they were basically set up. First year uni, French professor is some dude who immediately took leave for burnout, replaced by go-getter master's student. She is late 20s and about a 6, keeps calling on me during class. One night at the student bar where I was bouncer, she shows up drunk and keeps saying hi to me every time she has to use the washroom. Fast forward 3 hours, I am done putting up tables and restocking the kegs, leave, see her sitting at picnic table, head in arms. Give her a shake, she apparently decided to wait for me. I drive her home and help her up to her apartment. She disappears for a second and comes back completely naked. Whoa. Don King Merkin. She starts coming onto me hard and I start to go with it. She unzips and starts to blow me, but it's not good. She gets up and goes to her bedroom. I use the washroom. Get back and she is asleep. Make my exit. C sexual experience netted me a C+ in the course. Never thought about it since until this thread. It's amazing. Every time the teacher turns out to be a man, I feel creeped out and sad. But every time the teacher turns out to be a woman, I'm impressed and mildly aroused. Praying to God nobody talks about preschool. I had a young professor during my last year of school. Shortly into the semester, I went to his office to see if he wanted to have dinner, was only 29, super hot, and he said yes. Dinner was awkward as fuck, but one thing led to another and we ended up back in his office doing the nasty. I spent the rest of the semester working my ass off to get a great grade in that class to impress him. We would fuck occasionally after I attended his community league games, but I never saw his home, and his girlfriend did not know he had a girlfriend at the time. He said it was a friend from college, would frequently call while we were in the parking lot. It was classic fuck this girl until I get bored with her and don't instigate a serious thing, which was hard for me. 24, female at the time. It's been about 5 years and we don't talk anymore, but I never really cared for his personality, was a total dick most of the time, but he wasn't a horrible A. All in all, it made me feel good to be wanted by a sexy academic, and it made me try harder in school. I was definitely never heartbroken over it. That was the best semester on my transcripts. My English teacher confessed she was sexually attracted to me around April of my senior year. I liked her too, smart and cute and one of those teachers you can call by her first name. She was 29 or 30 at the time. We waited until after I'd graduated before giving it a go. It was just a one-night thing, a nice way to lose my virginity. We still keep in touch. A couple years ago, my wife and son and I visited her, spent the morning catching up. She'll always have a special place in my heart. There was quite a bit of student-teacher stuff at my high school. My case was not the most problematic. One teacher was rumored to have seduced 2 senior girls, one of whom has since confirmed it happened. Another male teacher and female student were clearly infatuated with each other, and nobody was surprised when they married soon after she graduated. And a female teacher had an affair with a male student and had his baby. She'd bring her baby to work and we'd all joke that it was probably Chuck's, since by then he'd graduated but spent all his time hanging out at school with her and the baby. And since then they've said yeah, Chuck was the father. And this wasn't a big high school, maybe 700 students. This was in the 80s and it wasn't like it wasn't taboo. It was taboo. But I don't think we appreciated the full import of power dynamics, and how they can be abused. I don't think what happened to me was wrong, but some of what happened at my school clearly was. 2 guys I went to high school with became teachers, but both were convicted of some sort of inappropriate relationship and obviously aren't teachers anymore. One of them was a middle school teacher. I teach now. My own personal history makes it a complicated topic and one I'm loath to discuss with my colleagues because I can't open up. It's not so much an issue now that I'm well past my prime, but my first few years of teaching there were certainly lots of times students, mostly female but not exclusively, would cross the line. When it happens you get the fuck out of there and tell somebody and don't give that student the chance to try again. In a way almost every teacher I've ever had has fucked me. Does a professor count as a teacher? Maybe a super teacher? Is there an AskReddit thread regarding super teacher sex stories? Whatever, close enough. This would have to go back to sophomore year at removed uni name because that's incriminating evidence. I was in the IT program, technically School of Information, but fuck you, IT is quicker. So we had those decked out computer labs that you could access after hours if you had a student ID that registered as you being a part of the IT program. Music department had a similar thing. It's amazing how many ladies will take you upstairs to teach you piano if you ask nicely, but that's a story for a different day. If my memory doesn't fail me, the professor was 26, I was 20, so the age disparity wasn't that far off. Sorry if that's what the kink of the thread is up, but I finally get a chance to talk about myself interestingly. But if you know anything about my uni's IT department, you'd know that the closest you come to, except for one light, late at night, dead silence, kind of creepy, so I'm quick to frighten, but this hall ain't 100 yards long. I heard a giggle followed by a come on and proceeded the last 2 steps before entering the room. The fluorescent lights were off, only a warm lit desk lamp that didn't look like it belonged to the lab. She was wearing her usual librarian get-up. Maybe it's just being a horny 20-year-old that gives you the intuition, or maybe I'm just stupid and should have gotten the hint earlier, but when I saw that her blazer was unbuttoned, her blouse undone to the extent that I could see her full, perfect D-size cleavage, the light blue lacy bra she had underneath, and a little skin even lower than the bra in the center of her chest. When I saw that, I knew things were about to get nuts, literally. Being the douchebag 20-year-old that I was, and girlfriend would argue, still am, years later, I was plenty prepared with rubber protection, and I chew minty gum overzealously. You know, on the off chance that I'm going to get fucked on the quad in the middle of the day. I think she herself must have seen plenty of porn. She was sitting cross-legged over the desk, leaning toward me slightly as I walked in. She giggled when I made eye contact, or should I say, chest contact, with her, and then almost as if she'd rehearsed it hours earlier, she slid off her pointed glasses, undid her bun, and gently shook her head to let loose those gorgeous brunette, silky straight locks. At this point, college man was in full swing. I think I made up the part about her shaking her head because I was busy shutting and locking the door behind us, but I swear she did something like that to embellish. As I approach her from the door, I see her shoulders shrink, her body quiver from excitement. For a moment, I felt I was going to jail based on how helpless and innocent she looked. But when I finally had my hands on her thighs as she sat on the desk, when I finally leaned in to kiss her, she immediately went from looking shyly at her own feet to glaring back up at me with a sexy confidence. She gave one of those glares you would give to your friends if a girl was escorting you out of a party to go back to her place. She licked her lips gently before grabbing my shirt with both hands and pulling me in close. All I remember while I was fading in and out of consciousness from having a painful tight pants development was her saying, "I need you." Perhaps too quickly to sound like the ladies' man, but confidently enough to play it off. I respond back, "Oh yeah? What do you need?" She paused for a moment, looks back down at her feet, then looks up to me, and says it, "I need about 350. Well, it was about that time that I noticed this sexy librarian of a professor I'd had a total in with was about 8 stories tall and was a crustacean from the Proterozoic era. I told her, "Damn it Monster, I ain't giving you no 350. Sure enough, it said, "How about just 250 instead?" Oh, now it's just 250. What? Is there a sale on Loch Ness munchies or something? Don't that guy just beat off? Contact with your actual professor is a 5-second office hour visit where you beg them not to fail you. Raising your hand and asking a question wasn't exactly forbidden, but it threw the lady professor off her game so hard that we figured it better to just ask each other after class and let her ramble. The thing is, for a 26-year-old bat-minded IT professor, she was exactly what you'd expect the sexy librarian in your fantasy to look like. Hair in a bun tight and finely combed so the I, M24, had a casual relationship with my professor, F32, after taking her classes for 2 semesters. I knew she was interested in more as soon as I read her comments on my graded essays. I probably should have asked her out after my first semester in her class, but I chickened out and re-enrolled in a class with her next semester. I think I got an A then a B+, lame I know, but that didn't stop me from asking for her number when I ran into her one night. I asked her about local comedy shows, we went out, and at some point I got drunk enough to make a move. The only thing she said afterwards was good job. Later she got cold feet, saying she worried it was just a teacher thing, but after I assured her it wasn't she started bringing up teacher-student roleplay in the bedroom. Which was really cool, since it wasn't even pretend. I'm really happy it happened, and to this day she's easily the smartest person I've been with. The sex was awesome too, and she helped me to start performing stand-up comedy, which I am very grateful for. But she got a better job far away, and that was that. I had to confront the fact that I just wasn't cool enough for this woman, which is never easy, but in all 10/10ths, would recommend. I'm not sure if this counts, but I was and currently am involved with my college theater department's tech director, faculty. We obviously had the feels for each other real bad, even when seeing other people, but neither of us made a move until I graduated. Then it all came pouring out of his mouth one night over our preferred activity of smoking cigarettes and bullshitting after hitting up a bar with some friends. We dated for about a month, but he wasn't over his evil ex yet, so we called it quits. It broke my heart in a big way and I never really got over him, but we went our separate ways. Fast forward a few years and I contacted him to help me get myself out of an abusive relationship I felt trapped in. Being an amazing human being, he came to my aid even though that controlling shit-spackled muppet fart who beat me forbade my ever speaking to him, which meant we hadn't spoken in years. He then helped me relocate to a different part of the state and set up a new life. More years went by, but we were always in each other's lives, occasionally as co-workers. Eventually, we were both single again at the same time, and after he went with me to get my first tattoo, once again over smokes and long, late-night conversation, he spilled his guts in wanting to date me because he thinks I'm awesome. I told him I think he's awesome, too, and we should absolutely be dating. We've been together nearly 2 incredibly kick-ass years and I'm pretty sure he's the one. We haven't stopped being a slightly scandalous coupling, though, as he is the tech director at one of the many theatrical set shops where I regularly paint, which technically makes me an employee even though scenic art is a different department for which he doesn't handle the hiring. Edit, line breaks because wall of text. Also decided to call the tenure of our relationship incredibly kick-ass because, well, it has been, I might or might have not been flirted with by a high school music teacher when I was 14-15. It made me really confused and uncomfortable at the time because I couldn't tell what his motives were. Still can't. He was a really good teacher, too. Friendly, well-liked. He was middle-aged and very attractive. He kept pushing me to come in before or after class to get help because I missed a couple of days. That's normal and all, but it rubbed me the wrong way. I just felt a weird vibe around him. I liked him a lot, but at the same time I felt sort of wrong. Not me, but there was one weird teacher at my high school who mysteriously started dating girls as soon as they graduated. Happened multiple times. One day I was the only student in my Thai class in Phuket. I noticed earlier my Thai teacher would sometimes give me extra attention. We were talking while waiting to see if any other students would arrive. She said, "I like strong men." Okay, I was thinking. Waiting for her to continue. Then she said, "You look like strong man." Which made it fairly obvious that she was into me. Not many minutes later we were shagging on her desk. Amazing Thailand. Thinking back, I feel great about it. My high school English teacher, English 2 and English Lit, was kinda flirty during my last 2 years of school. She asked one day if I had a girlfriend senior year and I told her yes. 2 years later I was at a bar, underage by a year, and saw her there. She was hammered but polite and cordial until she figured out I was underage, then she started sucking on my neck and rubbing my crotch. I was excited and embarrassed and confused. It's the only time I've ever walked out on a tab without paying. I go back home fairly often and hit the local hotspots. I've seen her there a few times. I just smile and tell that story to anyone that will listen. She has to be pushing 60 but she looks pretty good. A brunette Helen Mirren. Side note, 2 guys I went to high school with claim to have tag teamed her and I completely believe it. Not gonna lie, there were some teachers in my high school that I wanted to smash hard. I've always wanted to fuck my PE coaches, you lucky bastards. I was in high school in North Jersey in 1974. The high school had a smoking lounge for the students. One girl walked around holding the gym teacher's hand. It was a different time. Probably doesn't count, since I ran into my old sports teacher/coach after I'd graduated high school and college, but in any case, I was out and about, working as a part-time florist delivery driver, and walking back to my car after my last delivery of the day. I heard someone say my name, and looked up to see my old phys ed/coach standing there in the street. Straight away, I had to reconcile in my head that we were both adults now, and pushed away the instantly speculative thoughts that were running through my mind, because I'd had a bit of a crush on him through high school. We ended up going to a nearby cafe and talking for nearly 2 hours. During the course of the conversation, I got the idea he was being rather flirty, so I responded in kind. An hour later, we were at his place and OMG, all my teenage questions about the sexual possibilities of this man were more or less answered. We both got a workout that day, and then parted amicably, and I never saw him again. Was totally worth it. I never actually slept with anyone, but if my high school geometry teacher messaged me out of the blue and asked me if I wanted to get a drink or something, you'd be damn sure I'd say yes. Stupid young student me being super naive about the opposite sex missed big cues on multiple hot at least 7 and 8 maybe 9/10 advances. Didn't realize it all until years later what they were really saying. Oh Mrs. Riley. I don't know how many of these stories are true, I don't know how many of these may have been actually sexual assault, or something of that sort. So to those that were not seeking any sort of contact with teachers in this, I am really sorry that happened to you. For those of you who sought out to have sex with a person of authority in a school setting, I hate you so fucking much because I wanted to be that person. I don't actually hate you, I'm just so insanely jealous because I just always wanna have sex when I'm high. I've never gotten FT by a teacher, but I did get an F from a teacher. Does this still count? Never hooked up with a teacher, but now that I think about it, there was definitely a possibility of that happening when I was 16. So I had this English teacher who always thought I was such a smart student. She would go around telling all the other teachers how smart I was and would always boost my ego. One day me and the rest of the class are reading a book about a teenager and his girlfriend, Paula. Afterward the whole class is doing an assignment on the book in class, and as that's happening my teacher comes up to me and asks, "So do you have a Paula out there?" My teenage mind didn't think much of it, but now that I'm a bit older I realize that it was a small door that could have led somewhere if I had any clue about women at the time. I know. The story sucks, but I felt like sharing that. I.F. was having sex with one of my coaches, while Lynn was in high school. In the late 90s, I played varsity on this team all 4 years of school, so got to know him well. He was married and in his early 30s. During my 9th and 10th grades we got along like buddies and there was no flirting. I became captain of the team in 11th grade, meaning I became more involved in the coaching end. So, now I spent even more time with all coaches but mostly him. While the team bussed to out-of-town games, I rode with him in his vehicle. He was the assistant coach and wasn't required to go on the bus, plus, he often hauled most of the team's gear in his truck. He was also a teacher at my school. I was never in any of his classes though, so we mostly saw each other at practice, games and team activities. It turned physical in 11th grade when I just turned 17. Early into my 3rd season, he and I drove to our home venue and beat the bus there. We were alone in the parking lot. At this point I did have a small crush on him. I never even fantasized about sex or even just kissing him because I also knew by then that I was mostly into girls anyway. Now, back to the empty parking lot. We sat in his truck talking and just waiting. Having come directly from school, he needed to change into his coaching clothes. He just started to undress right there in the truck. He took his shirt off and I can still remember that weird feeling I got when I saw his grown man, hairy chest. It did things for me no boys my age chest ever did. I told this story to my wife and she joked that this was the moment I went from lesbian to bisexual, since up until then, I had only had sex with girls. Anyway, he wasn't saying anything to me, just undressing himself. I tried not to look because I considered him my friend and I found myself getting turned on by this and didn't want to make things weird. I didn't think at the time that coach meant for anything more to happen, but I commented on how I really liked his hairy chest. Well, of course he asked if I wanted to feel it and I touched his chest while he began to touch me. First, just my shoulder, but the more I ran my hand across his chest, the braver he got until he was grabbing boob. We kissed and groped each other for a few minutes that first time. Each encounter, we stepped it up until we were having sex in the equipment room at the facility before practice one day. After that, we could plan our sex around games and practice. Since I was already riding with him, we just planned to leave early or take detours. Or I'd let him give me a ride home after games. So happens he also has a background in physical therapy, so when I hurt my back, he could hook me up while giving me massages and therapy in the training room. In there, it was mostly hand stuff because it was super risky since the other PTs or coaches could come in. We continued having sex for 2 years and decided to end it when I graduated from HS. I recently looked him up as he is still coaching at the same school. He still looks handsome to me. He was the first man I had a crush on. He was the second male I had sex with, but the first one that I really was attracted to. I haven't ever told my friends from school or anyone else that knows him. I've told a couple of my closer friends and of course I've told my wife. I think about him and the sex we had occasionally because even after all of these years, it still turns me on. I don't think I'd ever like to contact him though. Things ended nicely and not weird and uncomfortable, so I'd like to keep it that way. I didn't have sex with my teacher, but rather a teacher. A female law professor. No relationship, just her getting back at her husband by fucking me on the hood of his $250,000 Mercedes-Benz and various other places and occasions. She wasn't my teacher, but she was a teacher at the college I went to. I work in a supplement store and the rec center is pretty nice for the college, so naturally we get a lot of people. Anyways, she came in one day and I didn't think much of it other than how friendly she was and how much she bought that day. She comes in a few times over the next month or two and basically bought whatever I told her to. Eventually she had a bad coupon and I gave her the amount off anyways because she was a regular. So I ended up messaging her on Facebook saying that I felt bad about it and hoped she noticed it on the receipt. Next thing you know, I get a friend request, a message, and a week later I'm at her house. She claimed nothing was gonna happen, but turns out she had no underwear on and coincidentally I didn't either. We fucked all night long. I'm 25 and she's 35, she was her in damn prime. It was glorious. Let me nut inside of her too, her tubes were tied. One of the best nights I had in a while. She broke it off for this other guy too. Kinda sucks, but oh well. Probably too late to this post, but when I was a senior in high school I hooked up with my substitute theater teacher. I was a typical overly confident HS guy, 18, and she was a shy young actress whose side gig was teaching, 24. I was in a play and she was in charge of my costumes, so we spoke a decent amount, and every time we did I would try to push the envelope and say something over the top. She would always blush, so I kind thought that was a hint and asked for her number in case there was a wardrobe malfunction. Instead I called her later and invited her to the beach. I was surprised she said yes, considering we honestly had barely spoken. She showed up, we made out, she gave me head in the car. We kept it up for about 3 months or so, but I kinda got over it, so I let it fade. I had sex with her English teacher, but only because she was working for an escort agency and I paid her. Senior year of high school, she was my babysitter until she was 16. She went to a well-known college. Ended up my math teacher, saw I had potential but wasn't applying myself, asked me to come to her parents' no shit house for tutoring and coffee. Sex happened. It went on for about 2.5 months. I stopped answering questions on tests or doing homework. I paid for it in college, but I ended up passing. Sex was decent, 7/10 would do again. Teacher flirting and said I did not have to do final assignment, asking me about my dress, shirts, girlfriend, etc. All of a sudden, one day, she always wondered what I kissed like, and we sold have a conference in her office after hours and talk about my classes. I went and tried to play it cool, even though I wanted to taste her so badly. She read something she wrote and I actually was interested. After some small talk and kindnesses, she got up, flipped over a sign on the outer door that read, "Student Conference, swear to God," and locked the door. After she sat back down and I got a whiff of her blouse as she swung onto the couch, I moved over after a bit and she said it was okay if I wanted that kiss. I said, wait a minute. I leaned in and smelled her hair, slow, then her neck, real shallow, like I was already full of air. When I kissed her lips, it was startling to both of us. Sneaky and soft, then rolling, glancing. And I didn't notice till later in my car, the little scratch on the back of my neck. We had stopped, because there were others making some copy racket in the staff wing. We made plans to go to a movie, where we made out as much as we could on a Thursday afternoon in a theater with 5 or so other patrons. Later, she told me her other teacher, girlfriend asked her what it was like, if he was a good kisser. She said to her, it was amazing. And told me the girlfriend replied, oh, fuck. Because it was bound to continue. It did. We got together at that woman's apartment while she was out of town. Wine and clothes finished off on the way to the bed, and it was actually a wondrous thing, before she got frightened about other meetings, after the friend's apartment was no longer available. We were together a few times and still kind to one another, but she pushed me away right before she moved to another job in another town, just a goodbye coffee and a mutual pact to never tell about her, by name or specifics. TL, Doctor, hot teacher let me have it, right in the kisser. I feel about it, all the time. Edit, words and spelling. Really good story. So the legal drinking age in Germany is 16? Here in America it is 21, sadly. I had sex with my science teacher after I left the high school she taught at. Something about neglectful husband and shit like that. It was so generic I felt bad but fulfilled the fantasy ever so FTW. I feel horrible coming here looking for a comment that says, when I found out I would fail if I didn't. I had this English teacher in high school. Best teacher I've ever had, super intelligent, engaging, and hilarious in his teaching style. I still reference him when I talk about why I want to become an author. I was going through a serious depression my senior year, and when I didn't feel like going to class I would just hang out in his classroom and he and I would talk about horror movies and stuff. Well, I never had sex with him, though sometimes I wish I had, but I say all of this cause he was a really awesome guy. He wound up getting fired a year after I graduated because he got with a former student. They're married and have a kid now, who's named after a character from Dracula. Raped. I feel raped. I was 14. He was 36. It's not okay. I feel so many of these stories are fake, but I can't stop reading. I was 15 when the beloved old English teacher finally retired due to health issues. She was replaced by a young guy, fresh out of college. Everyone was a bit wary at first, but he ended up being pretty funny and charismatic and was definitely skilled at his craft. A few weeks in, I started noticing him giving me special attention. It was always subtle, like his gaze lingering on me a few seconds longer than normal during a lecture, or him missing a mistake or two on my papers. I didn't really think anything of it, since teachers tended to like me anyway and all of what he did was almost unnoticeable. I continued to disregard everything, until the fire drill. My school had a scheduled fire drill at around 10 in the morning the second Tuesday of every month, as well as some scattered around here or there at different times. I was always in his class when the Tuesday fire drill was scheduled, and I think it was about November when this happened. The fire alarm rang, and everyone got out of their seats, as usual. I was last in line. He was coming up behind me. When nobody was looking, he grabbed my ass. It wasn't one of those quick accidental brushes that happen in close quarters inadvertently. His fingers sank down and he squeezed so hard it almost hurt for about 2 or 3 seconds. I was pretty fucked up for the rest of the day. He rubbed my shoulders in class for about 5 minutes a couple of days later, but other than that, he didn't pull anything big. Until after winter break. I don't remember the precise date, but if I recall correctly, it was mid to late January. After class one day, he pulled me aside and told me to meet him in his room after school so we could go over some of my work because he thought that I was part of a cheating ring. I wasn't, so I didn't worry much about it, and all I did was text my mom that I would be home an hour or two late and wait for the end of the day. I came in like I was supposed to, and we chatted for a while about things like pets and movies while he flipped through some assignments of mine. After a while, point blank, he asked me, "Are you a virgin?" I started shaking and asked him why he wanted to know, obviously freaked out. He answered with something about how he didn't bring me in about cheating, and that he wanted to have sex with me. I was equal parts naive, attracted, he was pretty good looking, and scared of what he might do if I said no, so I just sort of agreed. He led me up against the wall, pulled down my jeans and basically tore off my shirt, and we fucked. I remember one of his hands over my mouth so I wouldn't make any noise, and the other clutched around my waist and rubbing my dick. It was simultaneously horrifying and the best sex I've ever had. We finished up and he sent me home. He didn't do anything different from any other teacher I had after that, just continued to be the person everyone else saw him as. We never had sex again. It's been 5 years now. This is the first time I've told anyone. In my senior year, I had sex with my AP Calc teacher. She was a really nice person, and she had moved near me around the time she started teaching. She was only in her mid-30s, but she was super hot. So, one day, I'm walking home from school and she pulls her car up and asks me to get in. We go back to my place. But my parents aren't home. She makes a move and one thing leads to another. We continued this relationship, up until one time when she wanted to see what sex in the shower was like. We were going at it, but she slipped and fell, hitting her head and it started to bleed. I told her not to panic, because I knew where the gauze was. So I check the cabinet, but instead of gauze, it's the serious tag I forgot to use. In medical school a microbiology professor flirted super hard with me. I was only 23 years old and I'd just been dumped by my long-term girlfriend. Definitely felt the need. The professor was a beautiful brunette probably about 35 years old. She could have easily passed for 30 or younger. I would go to office hours to chat with her and when I would show up she would close the door so nobody else could interrupt. Lots of long talks and meaningful glances. There was a lot of hardcore flirting going and I was sorely tempted on, but ultimately I was too afraid that if we got caught I would get kicked out of medical school. There was a zero tolerance policy about such things. Fast forward a year and I am a third-year student doing clinical rotation. This was in the 1990s and we had a very early electronic medical record system. The system had a funny quirk that whenever you logged on it dropped you into the chart of the last patient that the prior user have been working on. Usually you just exited out and started whatever you had to do. Nowadays they could never have a system like that for privacy reasons, but this was really primitive. Once at about 3 in the morning I'm on call and log in to look up a patient, and the patient's chart that it dropped me into was hers. It was the result of a test for vaginal herpes and it was positive. I totally freaked out, but for sure it was her. Honest to God, this really happened. Biggest bullet I ever dodged. When I was 16 I didn't have sex with my teacher, but I was close. My math teacher was pretty young, around early 20s, she had a perfect ass and she was fit. She had blonde hair and blue eyes and a little bit of an acne problem, but other than that she was gorgeous. That ass was hypnotizing, especially in jeans. One day I'm sitting in the back of class where I always sit. I don't like the attention the kids up front get, so I stay way in the back hoping to not get called, and I couldn't help but stare at her ass during class. Well, she was writing stuff on the whiteboard and I didn't notice this immediately, but she stopped. Then it caught my attention that she wasn't writing anymore, so I looked up at her face and she was looking. I totally got caught staring at her ass. All she did was smile and wink. I was completely in awe. The entire class looked at me like I was a lucky bastard. And one of my good buddies mouthed, "What the fuck?" After class was over she called my name and told me she had something to talk to me about. I thought I was in trouble for not paying attention in class. She was acting kinda different. She was acting all giddy and giggly. Kind of like a high school girl, and told me, says my name, "I can tutor you after class if you'd like." I was confused. I knew I had a good grade in algebra. I love algebra. She then followed up with, "You'd be the first student I've ever tutored," then giggled. I'm quite an airhead when it comes to socializing. I'm more book smart than people is smart. She told me to stop by after school's over to begin my tutoring. I just told her maybe, then smiled and walked off. My after-school activities consisted of getting money somehow to buy weed and hang out with my stoner buddies. And I also skipped a lot of school as well, but always aced my tests. I told my friends after school about that, and the only guy who managed to get a bag of weed forbade me from smoking that day because I didn't take my teacher up on her offer, which could have just been tutoring anyways. I'm 23 now, but sometimes I wonder about whether she was talking about tutoring or sexy stuff. I personally think it was the latter, but then it could have been just tutoring. Or even better, a combination of both. Haha. Good times, good times. When I was a senior, 18, my old math teacher, who was very attractive, added me on Facebook and we chatted over there for a while. Then she asked for my number, and then I was very clear that she wanted to be more than friends. She sent me pictures of her touching herself in class. And of course, me being a horny teen, I had to do it. We had sex maybe 10 times before I cut it off. We are still really good friends and sometimes we still hook up. So I don't really feel bad about it at all. Not sure if this counts. I was 19, she was 22. We met at a party, both drunk. I left her place and walked home at about 4:30 AM to snag my gear and get to morning hockey practice. At about 8 or 9, it's been almost 20 years since I was a freshman in college, she walked into my chemistry lab. I said hi, she looked mortified until she started laughing. She was the TA lab instructor. We dated for a bit, but in the end it didn't work out. Nice girl. I've been a TA and slept with a student. It isn't a great story though. Meet her out at a party and the rest was a pretty typical hookup scenario. I know a couple that are still together 30 years later. He was a PE teacher, she was his student. They hooked up and have been inseparable since. I guess sometimes you find more than sex in a relationship like this. This last year of university I had a class with a TA that was tall, redhead, and a solid 8. I'm a theater major and the entire department went to a regional theater convention in January. We were staying at the huge hotel that the convention was being held in. Students of age were offered free booze from 5 to 9, so needless to say everyone was plastered the whole week. A group of us, including the redhead, went out to a bar and continued our night of drinking. After a few rousing games of pool and an undisclosed amount of liquor later we left. As I went to pay my tab I realized that my license was missing. The frantic search for my identification begins. My TA whispers to me don't worry about it and I immediately have a feeling about how the rest of my night will transpire. We head back to the hotel where she leads me to her floor, but there are 3 other people in her room. So, we find an unlocked utility closet and go at it on the cement floor. As we are dressing back up she says, well, I guess I have to give this back to you now and hands me back my ID. We continued this undercover affair for the next 6 months until she graduated. Edit: I know now that someone stealing my license just to have sex might have been a red flag. She was indeed a little crazy. Class was filled with a lot of sexual tension between the 2 of us. Thanks for visiting Reddit Town Hall. Have a great day.